Gen Z revolution in Nepal took an unprecedented turn yesterday before the government finally decided to lift the ban. That's the big story that we're tracking for you this morning. Nepal's Oli government has lifted its controversial ban on several social media platforms after violent protests erupted in Kathmandu yesterday, led largely by Gen Z youth or those under 26 years of age. Now, at least 19 people were killed and over 300 injured in the protest. Protesters clashed with police near the parliament, where some broke through the security barricades as well as vandalized gates. A curfew remains in place across key areas, including the legislature, the president's residence and the prime minister's office. The protests that began over social media ban grew into a larger movement against deep-rooted corruption in the country. TikTok, the Chinese ByteDance-owned social media platform, continued to be accessible, but saw several viral videos of children and the politicians flaunting wealth, which added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, Meta's platforms like Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, as well as YouTube, the Google-owned media platform, unregistered under Nepal's new rules, for shutdown before resuming online later at night. The United Nations and Amnesty International have both called for a swift, transparent probe into alleged excessive use of force. The UN warned of deeply worrying reports of live ammunition being used. India has not commented yet, but security had been tightened in border districts while Nepal deployed its army in several unrest-hit regions. While there's no denying that the use of force against the protesting youth, many in school and college uniforms, cannot be justified, there still are tough questions that social media firms must answer to, especially in light of not complying with the law of the land and doing little to curb the menace of misinformation. And that's the angle that we want to take this morning on the Morning Brief at 9. So let's try and address these big questions that we have. First up, should governments even insist on big tech compliance with regulation, or should platforms be allowed to ignore the law under the free speech principle? Next up, why did Meta, that owns Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp, as well as Google, that runs YouTube, not register in Nepal? Should there have been at least one nodal officer and one employee and one office, like many other countries that these platforms operate in? Why was Nepal ignored and its regulations not adhered to? Next up, how big really is the menace of fake news, misinformation, as well as hate speech? Are there lessons to be learned from the backlash on X for anti-Semitism comments, or the fact that Meta abolished its fact-checking team soon after Donald Trump became US president in his second term earlier this year? We also ask, did the social media ban become just a trigger for allegedly disgruntled youth in Nepal over issues of unemployment as well as government corruption? And finally, now that the ban is lifted, does it allow social media platforms to operate with impunity, even if issues of misinformation, hate speech, and, as the Nepalese government claims, money laundering could be real? Nikhil Pawar, the founder of Media Nama, is here to break this down for us. Nikhil, good morning. Pleasure to have you here on News 9. Help us understand, is there a case for big tech to ignore regulation anywhere in the world?
Karthik, I don't think there's any case for big tech to ignore regulation anywhere in the world. But regulation also has to be reasonable, right? There were just 7 days given for compliance after a Supreme Court directive to social media platforms to establish a local presence in the country. Now, if you go back to the IT rules in 2021 in India, the government actually gave 3 months for compliance. And even then, some companies struggled to get a grievance redressal officer in place because that person would have criminal liability. And no one wanted to take criminal liability. So different platforms have different challenges in hiring, in finding resources. 7 days is too short, a time frame for someone to have a local officer, to have to go through a registration process even. And look, all of this also links to the impending social media bill in Nepal,
Right.
which is full of problems. It enforces pre-censorship of content by platforms. It holds platforms liable for the content that users may post on it. It has real ID verification requirements which undermine anonymity online, which is a critical part of free speech.
All right.
So No, I think platforms should have at least registered with the government. With the government, registration doesn't take time, but also look at the scale of the platforms. Right? Signal is a social media platform according to the government of Nepal. The
Right?
Signal is a messaging app. So is WhatsApp.
Correct?
Signal has a skeleton team of a time, like maybe 10, 12 people operating. They probably didn't even know about the fact that this law exists. So I
Right?
think there has to be reasonableness on both sides, um, especially when such a directive is given. It's most companies do not track Nepal specifically, and that has an impact. Some government somewhere might or a court might issue a directive, but that has to also be sent to the companies in question.
Sure. I understand, Nikhil, but I want to understand, and for the sake of our viewers, if you can simplify, what are the rights of intermediaries, which are these platforms, versus the criminal liability on them versus those who are posting on them? What is the role that intermediaries across the world play in ensuring that at least there is some reasonable amount of fact checking done? There is at least some taking down of viral content which is misinformation. Is there enough being done by social media platforms anywhere in the world?
So look, there is no doubt that social media platforms have rolled back fact-checking mechanisms because fact-checking itself was political, right? The
Exactly.
Republicans in the US argued that all the fact-checking that was happening was against them. So governments want their point of view to be presented. Even in India, the government tried to create a fact-checking unit, which was struck down by the Bombay High Court. So governments want their narrative to reign supreme. Often political parties that are in power don't want criticism online. And then platforms are supposed to fact check everyone. And who knows what exactly the truth is. So platforms have actually rolled back on these because it's a huge expense for them. They can't be expected to be the arbiters of truth because that's exactly what we worry about, right? If they censor something, don't censor something else, are they trying to influence the narrative in the country? So it's a no-win situation for the platforms. Now, the intermediary provision online, what it does is that it allows platforms to enable us, you and me, to post content online without the platform being liable for it. If the platform is liable for every random thing that every random person puts on social media, it will not survive. So the question is, do you want these platforms to even exist? And there is 90% legitimate usage of the platform. 10% might be incorrect, harmful, illegal.
Right.
Do you want to compromise the 90% by holding the platform liable for defamation, copyright, abuse? Uh, I think that will do more harm than good, right? Because even look at Nepal. For Nepal, messaging, social media is a means of being in touch with family because
Exactly.
so much of the population lives outside the country.
Exactly.
That gets shut down, and people will obviously be upset.
So, do you think the manner in which this regulation was first enforced and the manner in which the takedown was done, are there lessons to be learned there that A, give more time, like you mentioned, 7 days is not enough, and B, perhaps look at one platform, two platforms at a time rather than doing a surgical strike across the entire gamut of what they call social media? Because like you mentioned, Signal, WhatsApp, these are communication tools, and these are tools for expats to be in touch with their families back home. Should the government have been a little more mindful before a blanket ban being imposed, which eventually led to 19 youth actually dying in the line of these protests?
So I think firstly it's a misnomer that Signal and WhatsApp are social media platforms. They are messaging platforms, and social media is a very different construct where what you post is public, what you post is
Are these,
there are
just for the sake
interconnected
of
networks,
clarity,
right?
Nikhil, are these
Yeah.
not platforms as well where original content is getting created and getting disseminated and people have the ability to like it, share it, forward it to other people? So is that
Sure.
not in the same overall architecture of social media? Because at the end of the day, these are social conversations happening, albeit in a one-to-one or one-to-many if you're part of a group, as opposed to a one-to-public, arguably, when you're on a traditional social media platform.
So it is one to one, and even the one to many that those messages that go out, technically they're one to one. So in a group, if there are 50 people, a message goes out to each of those 50 people. So they are private messaging platforms and not dissemination to the public. Now for that, perhaps for each country, it needs to define what is dissemination to the public? Just because something can be forwarded by from one person to the other doesn't make it a public activity, because they're not sending it to millions for anyone to randomly discover it. It is push and pull both. Whereas in case of social media, it is just published online for someone who's browsing the web or browsing a platform can suddenly chance upon it, right? Someone you don't know. So private and public these are very, very important constructs. These are very important questions that you're asking. We cannot mess with this because it'll break the way messaging works. So I think we
Right.
need to separate messaging from social media, and this confusion that gets created that messaging platforms are social media platforms. They are not. In case of social media, also what the challenge lies over here is that, I think India did it right at that point in time where they gave a three month deadline to the platforms to comply. And we found that even that wasn't enough. You look at the GDPR in the EU, they gave 2 years for
Yeah.
companies to comply. So the complexity of the requirement and the scale of the deployment that these platforms will be required to have should should be taken into consideration. You can't just blanket issue something saying 7 days comply or else, right? And
Right.
that's why the rollback makes sense, because it's unreasonable.
All right, the rollback makes sense because it was unreasonable. Well, 15 days is what the government has given itself in Nepal. Let's see what regulations or changes in the regulation emerge after 15 days. Nikhil Pawar, founder Media Nama, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.